1,370. Another way of saying it is 1,370. What is that number about? It's a pretty large number, but that's the number of people that died today in the United States from cancer alone. Cancer is the second leading cause of death in this country, and it's the number one cause of death in those under the age of 85. And it knows no age boundaries. Some of those deaths today were children, 4, 6 years old, dying from cancer. Some of them were in their 20s. Some of them were in their 40s. Many of them in their prime of life. And before death took them, they became deformed. They became, many of them, in severe pain, having to take the highest doses of pain medicine known to mankind just to not pass the grave in extreme, excruciating pain. And Dr. Benson, a few years ago, while you were assistant provost of university and assistant to the president at Andrews University, you had some symptoms. And tell us a little about those symptoms.
Actually, I was feeling quite good. I went for my annual physical, and my doctor said, in your age bracket, I can tell you, you are my most healthy patient. I felt pretty good. Except 7 days later, my wife and I went for a weekend for a little camp out, and I finished hooking up the trailer. And as I came in, I said, you know, I don't feel good. For some reason, I don't feel like supper tonight. I'm going to lay down. And so I laid down on the bed, and after a little bit, suddenly there was a pain so sharp and so intense that I literally leaped off of the bed and grabbed my stomach area and said, "What was that?" I laid down and I was fine, and then suddenly it happened again. Again, extremely intense pain. I can only say in hindsight, remember the story of Jacob when he wrestled with the angel. And after wrestling all night, he was touched, and his thigh was put out of place, or he had to walk with a crutch. We know that the touch of God is so significant, you will not miss it. And I feel that that pain that I received in hindsight was the touch of God to send me to the doctor. Because what I later learned is I shouldn't have had any symptoms.
Cancer is often an asymptomatic disease. That's one of the bad things about it. You can look healthy. Your doctor can tell you you're the healthiest one in your age group. And you can actually be ready to die from it, essentially, in a short period of time. Because there's no blood tests that picks up cancer, per se. It's all indirect types of measurements. And so, as a result of this pain, how long did it take you to go to the doctor?
Well, I have to say, by Monday, I was ready to go to the doctor. So, by Monday at lunchtime, I took my lunch break. I had classes, I had committee meetings. I had a busy schedule. But by lunch, I said, I can't make it any farther. And I went to see the doctor. He said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I don't know." So he sent me to get a CT scan. He said, "You know, had I not just seen you, I probably would have given you some pain medication and seen if the pain would go away." There's another miracle, because my testimony is not about me. It's not about the cancer so much. It's about the God who can help us get through a cancer situation. Because that was the last day I ever had that pain. And had he given me pain medication, I never would have gone back.
So you had the CAT scan.
CAT scan, and I felt by that time it must be serious enough to call my wife. She came from work, and about 6 o'clock, the diagnosis came in, and the doctor came in to give me the news. And I was shocked to see his face. He kept looking at that and looking at me. I do not believe what I'm seeing. You have stage 4 intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma. I have never seen anything so bad.
Cholangiocarcinoma is a death sentence. It's actually a glandular cancer that comes from the bile duct. And this is a cancer that people don't survive. There are several cancers that are quick deaths and don't respond well to any type of treatment. And cholangiocarcinoma is one of those deadly cancers. Did he tell you that?
He did.
He did.
Yeah, he said the prognosis is pretty grim.
Right at that time, right after the CT scan.
Well, he put it in some pretty carefully guarded words.
Yeah, because you hadn't had a biopsy yet.
The biopsy was not yet. That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, and that's something also to learn. Cancer is only diagnosed when we take a look at it under the microscope with a tissue.
That's correct.
So they probably lined you up for a test to get a biopsy, correct?
Well, see, nothing really registered too much yet, except the sudden shock of it all. And of course, my wife and I shared our tears. But then I said, well, you know, I'm actually feeling better tonight, and I think I'm okay. And I'm leaving on Wednesday for for India. So I think I'll be going. No, he said, I'm hospitalizing you tonight. You're having a biopsy done immediately.
So you got hospitalized into, which hospital would this have been?
This was in South Bend, Indiana.
Okay. So South Bend, Indiana. Interestingly, just 2 weeks ago, we had a former graduate of Weimars speak for our alumni weekend, who is a physician in South Bend, Indiana, doing residency training there at Notre Dame. Kim Hazelton, one of our pre-med graduates, who did a great job here. But so hospitalized in South Bend, and then the biopsy the next day.
Right. While we waited for the biopsy, both the oncologist and doctor came by to see me in the hospital. They assured me that it was something extremely serious. They didn't know for sure the exact cancer, but they assumed it was cancer. And they said, we've never seen this before, so we're just going to have to experiment on how to treat it.
So what did they suggest for the experimentation?
Honestly, we didn't wait to find out. Fortunately, my wife's brother is a physician, and she talked with him, and he immediately did a study, where's the best liver cancer treatment centers in the U.S. And he zeroed in on 3. The closest one to us was the Mayo Clinic. And I asked my doctor for an immediate referral to the Mayo Clinic. And he said, I'll be happy to do that for you.
So how long did it take you to get to Mayo?
Once the biopsy was done, I was released from the hospital. And of course, I'm pain-free. I'm ready to go to India, Africa, wherever the Lord wants me to go. But the doctor at the Mayo Clinic talked with me directly on the phone and said, as soon as the biopsy slides are available. I don't want to read the report. I want to see the slides myself, and I want to actually see the tissue samples. I need those to be in my office. I'll see you the same week those samples get here. And it took about 5 days for the local hospital to process them.
It does take some time, all the stains and colors and things that they do. So finally, those slides were able to be viewed by the Mayo Clinic. And what did they say?
Yes, well, I took them there. I actually flew them there. We teach aviation at Andrews. I was there at the time. And so I flew with one of our planes with one of our student flight instructors. Unfortunately, I did not tell my wife I was going. She thought I was going to send the samples with the pilots. But I got there, I thought, my wife's already at work. I'll just fly up there and back. I feel good today. I'll be home before she's home. And so I had a taxi take me into the clinic, and I gave the samples to the nurse, and she said, yeah, if you don't mind waiting for a little bit. I said, sure. So I waited, and she came out. Could you wait a little longer? Sure. She came out a half hour. Please, I'm sorry to delay you, but we'd like you to wait a little longer. I said, okay. And then suddenly she came out with a whole stack of papers. I had not signed any insurance papers. I hadn't signed any papers of any kind. And she said, you can see you're already late to your blood test, but there's an MRI due on your schedule next in a few hours. Do not be late for that. I looked at her and said, no, I'm flying home. She grabbed my arm and she said, you are not leaving. So right then I realized something was serious. And when I called my wife on the phone and she said, no, you're not at Mayo, I said, unfortunately I am. She was not very happy. And she immediately began with my daughter to pack food and make provisions. It was a 9 to 10 hour drive to the Mayo Clinic by car. And they stayed up all night and drove. And 45 minutes before my appointment, they arrived. We went into the appointment to see the doctor. And after the MRI, he spent very little time with us and said, let me just be very brief. You have intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma. You do not have much time left. Unless we do something immediately, your life is not very long.
Wow.
He said, there is some windows of opportunity right now. I'd like to do a laparoscopic surgery to look and see inside without touching the cancer, but to see how the other organs are. I said, well, when would you do that? In a few weeks? He said, it will be done tomorrow morning. We're not going to mess around with you because it's that serious. And so he said, we'll schedule it. So I can remember waking about noon the next day, and we were scheduled to see the oncologist at 1:30. And we met with the oncologist. My wife and I had said, we're not going to do chemotherapy. As a nurse, she's seen the damages and problems with chemotherapy, and yet we prayed. God, direct us and help us to know what to do in this case. The doctor met with us from 1:30, and we did not leave his office until almost 5 o'clock. I have never seen a doctor take so much time and with brilliant explanations explain all the different cases of why this, why that, and explain the blood work. And he said, if we don't do something immediately, the doctor assures me, if someone wants to operate right now and try to take the cancer out, it will kill you. It's gone way too far. So this is your only hope. And finally, as we left the office, we said, All right. So there's 14 in a clinical study. 14 of us, all the same. We all have the same symptoms, the same disease, and we're all being given 2 basic drugs, cisplatin and gemcitabine. They're proven to be essentially non-effective for this kind of cancer, but they're the best that they have. But they're adding a 3rd clinical trial drug called a Baytrug from Germany, and hoping that that would prepare the tissue to be more receptive of the other drugs so that it would be more effective in treating the cancer. So that's what we agreed to do.
Cisplatin is a chemotherapy drug that's often used in very advanced cancer cases. It's very toxic. It does cause you to lose your hair and wipes out your bone marrow and all of those types of things in an attempt to get rid of the rapidly expanding cells of the cancer. And the other chemotherapy agent is a newer agent that's used in pancreatic cancer, and pancreas and liver glandular cancers have some similarities. Neither one do very well, but cholangiocarcinoma is far worse even than pancreatic cancer as far as its prognosis is concerned, and pancreatic cancer is very bad as it is. And so now they're adding a 3rd experimental drug. This is what happens when you are known as a specialty center for a cancer like this. You have, even though it's a very rare cancer, you have 14 of people all in the same place now ready to receive this experimental drug. And I'm going to call up your wife here now. Why don't you come on up for a moment? And Anita, and
while she's coming up, let me just say the treatment of this is not nice. 6 hours of infusion. The nurse came in with an armload of IV bags, 8 IV bags, and in 6 hours all of those have to be pumped through your system. And when one of the drugs goes in, your heart muscle seizes each time it beats. And so your heart hurts for an hour. And another one, when it goes in, makes you dry cough for the whole time it goes in for an hour. It's not fun stuff.
So Anita is a nurse, master's level nurse, and has taught at a number of nursing schools, teaching right now in the 65 nursing students in one class in Rwanda. But I've learned that you also do some research on your own as well. So tell us what type of research you did on this.
Well, I was just devastated when I found out what my husband had. Excuse me, because being a nurse, I've worked with cancer patients before, and I've seen patients who have been diagnosed with cancer die within 3 days. And when I started reading about what my husband had, I was just devastated, and I thought there is no way in this world that he's going to survive this unless the Lord provides a miracle for him. And somehow I knew, and I told my husband, we were vegetarians in all of our lives, but I realized that we had been eating a lot more sugars and sweets and things than we should have been eating. So I told our oncologist told us that sugar actually makes the tumor grow. It was 8.1 centimeters when they found it already, which is the size of a softball. And so he said, sugar makes the tumor grow. I said, fine. If sugar makes the tumor grow, I'm going to cut it out. I don't care. I would rather have my husband's life instead of having sugar. So I watched everything that we had on boxes and everything, and I cut out everything and went all natural because that was the only way we could go. And I started reading everything. I told my husband, chemo kills everything in your body. I said, the only way you're going to survive is that we're going to have to start looking for everything that's high-quality food. And so I wanted to replace everything it was killing, all the vitamins and minerals, all the proteins, all the irons, everything. We went for high-quality food and everything we could find. We did away with all the pastas because they break down into starches, and the potatoes and things like that, and said, no, we've got to go collards and kale and greens, And so we did, and then beans and lentils and split peas. I did like split pea soup and things like that. Then we did juicing. I read everything I could about Mayo about this disease, and everything was so just devastating. Everything said less than 1% chance of living, and they had such little information on it. But every information I read was so bad I didn't want to read anymore. And so I got down on my knees. I said, Lord, I know that you have promised us somewhere that you have promised we can prosper and be in health. Show me how we can do this. And I was just crying. And I said, I know that you have conquered this. And Mrs. White states that it's a virus, and somehow we can conquer it with God's help. And when you do everything in God's power, then it says that, she says that, then he'll take the rest from there and do what he needs to do. Everything that you can, it says, and then if you do everything you can, then he will move it from there. And so I prayed, Lord, show me. And so I started researching everything, like I said, all the high-quality foods. And in the morning, we started doing some juicing, and I put in the kale and the spinach in the juice. And I gave it to him. The theory behind that was that the juice would go down the fruit, and the tumor would grab onto the fruit sugars, and then the antioxidants from the fruit would go in and kill the tumor. And we did that for about a half hour before he ate breakfast, and a half hour before he ate lunch. And it worked. The tumor started shrinking. It was unbelievable. And the doctors were very surprised. And then after the juicing, we would do high-quality foods that I would give him so that he would get both, not only the juicing, a half hour later I would give him his food then. And the third time, it had shrunk 3 times, and on the 4th time, when they finally decided to resect it, which they never thought they would, it had shrunk again, and it was only 50% viable. It was absolutely unbelievable. Everyone else in his study passed away. He was the only one that survived out of his whole study. And he's had 14 CT scans since then, and all of them have been negative for tumor. And they said it comes back after the surgery, within 3 to 4 months usually, after the surgery. We nearly lost him so many times because after the surgery he had many complications that set in, and the tissue sloughed away from the liver. And they put in a drain because he was in so much pain because of the fluid, and it was like a septic that was coming from the tissues that were sloughing away from the liver where they had taken it out. They resected 2/3 of his liver, and then they spliced his jejunum, so he had a hepatico-jejunostomy, which means that they took away 2/3 of his liver, and then they spliced his jejunum in 2 and brought up the bottom half of the jejunum up to the ducts of the liver, and then the area from the stomach, from the jejunum, they put in and spliced it again and put it in the side of that. So he cannot have a regular colonoscopy or esophageal duodenoscopy, thank you, at all. And they have to be really careful. But it's just been absolutely amazing how he's survived from this and how God's taken care of him. And I believe he's absolutely a miracle.
All right. Well, Anita, it was ahead of her time on the research. I'm very pleased in regards to that, because around that time, and now things are starting to change, but around that time, many cancer doctors were telling their patients to stay away from antioxidants, because antioxidants protect good cells, we know that, but they thought they're going to protect cancer cells too and protect it from not getting the chemotherapy and not killing it. So if you read a lot of cancer literature out there, they'll actually steer people away from a plant-based diet like you were utilizing, saying that we don't want to protect the cancer cells. Antioxidants are good for healthy people, but they're not good for unhealthy people. And in reality, that's wrong. The evidence was already accumulating that antioxidants actually can kill cancer cells, just like you stated. And then by taking up the sugars with the antioxidants, you're going to do a better job with that. And so I was very impressed with your wife's research and insistence on putting you on this dietary program. But tell us a little bit now, back to you, Verlyn, about this time when you were now in significant pain and discomfort. You have a drain in. What's going through your mind? Pretty weak, also septic.
if I can back up, there's one key part that I think it plays an important role. After the laparoscopic surgery and we elected to go through the chemo, we had to go back home and wait a few days to get started into the chemo rotation at the correct time. And the first thing we did when we got home is called the church elders and said, I want to be anointed now. If I have a short time to live, if that's my lot in life, I want to dedicate my wife and my children to the Lord. I want to dedicate my life to the Lord because I want to die with a smile on my face. If I'm going to die soon, I want it to be the right way. And so that was a very key decision. And I think that helped when I had all the pain. Because one night, as I lay in bed, Anita had gone back to the house we were staying in, which is another miracle. One of the doctors at Mayo moved out of his home. He had lost his wife 3.5 years earlier to cancer. He knew what it was like. When he found out about our case, and we were traveling from Michigan all the way to the Mayo Clinic, he moved out of his house and went into an apartment so we could have his house as a family during my recovery. We used his house for an entire month. So she had gone back to the house, and I was laying in the hospital in so much pain. I mean, you don't cry tears anymore. Pain is so intense. It becomes so unbearable that you almost wish for death. And I was in so much pain. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I rang the nurse, and I said, I've got to have some pain medication. I cannot tolerate this any longer. She said, I can't. You're already maxed out. You have to wait 4 hours, then I can give you pain medication. And then she left. And as I lay there, I suddenly realized, it's done. Life is over for me. It's tonight. All I need to do is close my eyes and just relax. And that will be the end. I'll never see another dawn. I'll never see another day. It was as clear as can be that this was the end of my life. But we serve a God that is so wonderful, because at that very time, he reminded me, you have people praying for you all around the world. There is power in friends that pray. Build friends that will pray for you, because it will help you someday. Because I said, I will not give in and just close my eyes. I will not let this just be the last day of my life. And within 20 minutes, I fell into the most peaceful sleep. I slept for 6 hours. And when the nurse saw me awake, she said, why didn't you ask for pain medication a long time ago? I could have given it to you. I said, I don't need it now.
So, as these drains are in you, this discomfort, all of these things, they're still wanting to give you chemo, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and had they told me at the time, this was February 7, the day of my surgery, which was scheduled for 1.5 to 2.5 hours, which ended up being 7.5 hours duration. And then after surgery, I failed to recover for another 6 hours. So it was a long process. I thought the drains were going to be in me until just the middle of the next week. The drains did not come out until June 6 or 7. The drains are not fun to have in you. And they had to be flushed every day. She had to flush them out. It's not a fun procedure.
And so when it got to that point of giving the next round of chemo with all of this.
Yeah, unfortunately, they said the chemo now is the standard chemos. You're not on the clinical trial drug anymore. That was only prior to surgery. Now you're on just the standard. So go ahead and have it done at your local hospital. So I went to a local cancer clinic and signed up for getting my dosages of chemo. And the doctor said, oh, well, you've gone through it before surgery. This is going to be a piece of cake now because you know what it's like, and you're going to breeze in, breeze out of here, and you're not even going to know we're doing this. But when they gave me the chemo, I thought, wow, I think this is even worse than before. And so after a few times, and I'm reeling for the next few days, man, that was bad. Go ahead.
The issue here was that they had removed the trial chemo because after the surgery he couldn't be on the trial chemo. And the problem was they doubled the dose of both chemos after. And so that's what was causing this problem.
Didn't quite realize that, but it wasn't the same after all. It was double. But go ahead.
Yeah, so it took us actually a few weeks to figure that out and to realize they were giving double dose, and that's why I was having such a difficult time with it. The Mayo doctor was much more considerate, and because I did not want to take any other medications, they generally give Neulasta and blood stimulants to make your cells produce. I want to just talk about one thing that happened earlier in the treatment. At Mayo, I was still on the 3 drugs, and having to travel all the way. As it got winter, I couldn't fly by an airplane. We had to drive. We went through, that was the worst winter on history, and we had to go every 2 weeks, rain or shine. And so we drove on black ice, through whiteouts, through you name it. We saw cars in the ditch. It was just a terrible winter to be traveling, but God was merciful and gave us good traveling. But we arrived on one trip, and the doctor said, your platelets are too low. We cannot give you a treatment. So I had to turn around and go all the way back. And I have to have a driver with me because I can drive there fine, but on the way home I am far too sick. I can't drive. And so we came home, waited another week, and went back and got the treatment. But this happened a second time. And the doctor had said, I want you to do your blood tests locally so that you don't come all the way. So I did that, and when the blood tests were reported to Mayo called me on the phone one Friday afternoon and said, we have bad news for you. You've been ejected from the program. This is the second time your platelets have been too low. The rules are very, very strict, and the clinical trial drug says you cannot be part of the program any longer. So you might as well just stay and do the local drugs and without the Bay drug. And I said, well, that's not good because we already know that the 2 aren't going to help me. I need all 3 if that's going to help, which in the end really wasn't the help. Anita can tell more about that. But right now it was the hope I had. It's the hope of finishing this treatment. Hopefully it will get me through this. And so I said, remember, we've done this test 4 days early. Yes, he said, but your blood count is down to 49,000. It's got to be over 100,000 for us to give the treatment. The chances in 4 days of your cells doubling, a little bit more than doubling, is just not in the picture. It's just not going to happen with you. So you need to accept that and know that that's not going to happen. I said, I'm a man of prayer. I believe the Lord can do that if he wants to. So can I do the blood test? And he said, well, if you want to, go ahead and do that. We'll watch for it, but don't expect it. So that was discouraging. And so I immediately made another appointment for a second opinion at a different hospital in Michigan where they do liver transplants, thinking maybe he would be able to give me a different story. we were able to meet with the principal surgeon that does all the transplants. He met with us for 2 hours, and he said, I don't know why Mayo didn't take it out months ago. I can take your tumor out right now. Let's just get it out and be done with it. Either you're going to survive or you aren't. What's this waiting around for? He said, there's only one problem. You have 12 to 14 extremely enlarged lymph nodes in the region. That's pretty sure a case that they're full of cancer too. We've learned here at this hospital that if those surrounding lymph nodes are full of cancer, then don't even bother with the surgery because you're not going to survive. But at least you'll know. And we all talked about it, and we were on the way home saying, you know, this actually does make sense. Let's get the biopsy and try and get done with this.
Typical reasoning of a surgeon, I should say.
So we had said, we'll let you know for sure tomorrow, and we'll schedule it for next week and get this over with. All this months of waiting is done. We were just content that we'd all four, her sister is a nurse also, her husband, my brother-in-law, is a hospital administrator, retired, and everyone had the same opinion. Let's do that. Let's switch and get this done. The phone rang as we're driving down the road. It was my doctor at the Mayo Clinic. He said, how soon can you get here? And I said, what do you mean? Well, your blood count just came in. I said, oh? So what does it say? And here's where, when we say it's impossible, I like to think that God has humor. And God says, you need double? That's nothing. I'll give you quadruple. My blood count went from 49 to 206,000 in 4 days. He said, I don't understand it.
It actually wasn't so you could get the Bay drug. It was so that you could stay away from that surgeon.
That is correct.
But at that time, you didn't know that.
We didn't know.
So yes, I hadn't heard that part of the story, but it makes sense. But I know there came...
And 2 days later, when I did get to, because I dropped off the girls, and John and I continued right on to Mayo. So this is 2 days later from the blood test that I'd just done. The blood count went to 384.
Wow. Wow. So they ended up doing the surgery
Yes.
at Mayo. That 7.5 hour, very meticulous type of surgery. But I know there came a point in time when the effects of this double dose of chemo was indeed killing you.
It was. Yeah. We'd been on it for only about half of the treatments that Mayo wanted to see prescribed. And suddenly, I began running a fever that we couldn't break. And at the same time, I was starting to get ringing in the ears. And I was getting tingling on my scalp and on my fingertips and on my toes. What's that? Yeah, the high fever. And so with those three together, the research that we had been doing, the fever didn't make sense, but the other two sensations was indications of long-term hearing loss, which would become permanent. And then, what is the loss of feeling called? Neuropathy. That would be permanent neuropathy. And I just began realizing, I don't want to live with continued numbness in my fingers and with ringing in my ears where I can't even hear people talk. And I began praying about it and asking my doctor. I scheduled another appointment. He said, I have no explanation for any of this. So I called Mayo. This is my local doctor doing the oncology. So I called my Mayo doctor and said, I think it's time to stop. I believe God is using these signs to tell me to stop the chemo now. Oh, he said, You can't stop. I mean, you are the only one that we have gotten this far. And we've got to have you go through the whole thing to save your life. And you've got to do this. We talked for 45 minutes, and finally he softened and he said, so let me ask you this. If the cancer came back, what would you do? Would you feel that Mayo had not been faithful to you and forced you to finish it? I said, absolutely not. It's my choice. If I didn't do it, it's my own fault. He said, good. I can see you're determined. Now I'm going to tell you the rest of the picture. We don't know. We don't know if you've had too much already or if 1,000 treatments is what it's needed. We are only trying a prescribed plan and trying to fulfill what we are guessing might be good, but we have no idea because we haven't come this far before. He said, you have a problem, though. The surgeon who operated on you is really concerned that this case becomes successful. So he's not going to want to have you quit the chemo. So when you come to get your port out, he's going to really pressure you. I said, remember, I believe in God. So let's have that as a sign. I'm going to pray that he will not balk at all, but he will allow the chemo to stop and not give me any pushback. Well, you're going to meet with him right away. So we went to Mayo, and when I walked in to see the surgeon, he looked at me and he said, Jackie, is his nurse, Jackie, come here. Look at this guy. Look at how good he looks. This is the guy that we operated on back in February. He's here to get his port out. He's done with chemo. This is a success case. God answers prayers.
They also added that they weren't sure the chemo had helped at all.
That's exactly right.
And they were honest about that as well. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just want to say a couple more things. We didn't just do diet because I went back to the Spirit of Prophecy and read Ministry of Healing again and also read Council of Diets and Foods again. And I was impressed that I needed all 8 natural remedies. So we went back to all the 8 natural remedies again, which means that he started exercising again also. Because I read where oxygen is, tumor can't grow. So I said, you're going to have to start getting oxygen to all of your tissues. So he started exercising, and he could only exercise 10 minutes the first day. And I said, that's wonderful. Great. Keep it up. And so he did. And finally, after a little bit longer, he was able to go 2 miles a day. Yeah.
Let me tell you what made the difference. Exercising, especially when you've been so sick, and I have a scar that goes like this, 10 inches. It's a huge scar. Your innards are really messed up, and you haven't been walking for a long time, and it was painful for me to just take a little step like this. I could hardly shuffle. And to be on the treadmill and trying to do that is no fun. I can remember working on that thinking, man, I've been here at least half an hour. And I look at the time, and it's been 5 minutes. I mean, time just stalls. But it wasn't long, and one day I just had, I believe it was God inspiring me, take your iPad down and start a path through the Bible. So I put it on the audio mode and also could follow the text. For the first time in my life, I began reading and listening to the Bible at the same time while I was exercising. And that's when I hadn't been walking more than a week or two, and I looked down and I'd already walked over 2 miles. So that became, I've gone through the Bible many times now, and I enjoy doing that when I exercise.
And then we also used natural remedies like the hot foot baths when his fevers went high. There was one night that he was so sick when we were at the doctor's home there at Mayo. And he was on 3 of the hardest antibiotics. and his liver was sloughing away, and I was continuing having to irrigate it constantly. And his fever was really high, 102 to 103. I couldn't bring it down. So I prayed really hard. I said, Lord, I'm losing my husband. He's on 3 of the highest antibiotics that he can be on, and he's not doing any better, and I need help. I need to know what to do. He impressed me at 1:30 in the morning to get up and give him a hot foot bath. Hot foot bath sounds funny for a fever, but what it does is it shocks the circulation into moving around, and it brings it down out of the head and gets it moving, and so that it brings the fever down. And so I told him that night I was going to give him a hot foot bath. He says, no, I just don't want a hot foot bath. Just go to bed. And I said, no, I'm going to give you a hot foot bath. So I gave him a hot foot bath, and by morning his fever had broken. But I knew it would come back up again. And that night it went back up again to 101, but it had come down several degrees. So I gave him another hot foot bath, and by morning it had broken down again. And by the next night it came up to only 99. So I knew we were gaining on it. And I gave him one more the 3rd time, and it was totally gone by the next morning. So God totally answered prayers all along the way. There came a time where I was pushing him around in a wheelchair because he was too weak to walk. And I tell you, prayer after prayer after prayer, and miracle after miracle. I asked the doctor, how long does it take for the chemo to work? He said usually the first 2 to 3 days. And they always tell patients on chemo not to go out in the sun because it hurts the skin and it also hurts the eyes with the results of the chemo reaction. And so I told him we've got to get that sun no matter what, because that helps to release the platelets. It gives you the vitamin D in your body and helps get out what you need. And so we did. About after the 3 days, he got back out in the sun. I said, I don't care if it's 10 minutes. I don't care if it's 15 minutes. You got to get sun every day. So every day he could possibly get sun, he was out there getting sun.
The first day when you come out from having the treatment, you want to run for cover because the sun touching any part of your skin, it just burns like fire. So they're right. But within 3 days, that effect goes away, and then I began going out, and even in the wintertime when there's snow all over in Michigan, I went out and tried to get at least 10 to 20 minutes of sun every day. And there was one day that I went, Anita and I both went for my appointment, and the doctor said, you know, you're my last patient of the day. Sometimes I don't know why I do what I do. Oncology, at its best, is only about 40% efficient, effective. And today, I have given bad news to every one of my patients. Every single one, all day long. It has not been a good day. But you're my last patient. I've got wonderful news. I can't believe it. Your tumor again has shrunk.
It was just a miracle. And the other thing we used were charcoal patches. I don't know if you know of they're like a gel type patch now. So after the 2 to 3 days, I would put the charcoal patches on his abdomen to pull out any residual poisons that were in him from the chemo, which really helped. It was amazing. And then I also gave him a really, really strong garlic drink, which he didn't like at all, and I don't blame him because it was really strong. But it had like a cup of water and a whole lemon, and then I did like 4 to 5 cloves of fresh garlic in there. And then a little tiny piece of ginger and a little bit of olive oil. But it worked. It was incredible. And garlic is a strong anti-cancer. And it was amazing. There was just many, many things, so it wasn't just one thing.
Yeah, you do have to work with some of it because, and it's a learning thing. I've drinking a lot of things and lost meals because the potions were too potent. But on the other hand, I also knew that they were doing their work. And my attitude, I think, also helped because I told Anita, do whatever it takes because I want to live. If it means going without sugar, no big deal. I'll do it. So that wasn't a problem. And yeah.
Well, I know after it was completely gone, and they were using the word that this looks like it is, completely gone, but of course there's always a chance for it to come back. You were asked to take a special post at the presidency there in Rwanda, and one of your missions was to start a medical school there. And before I get into that conversation, just a little bit about what we're told regarding the most precious fruit. Sanitariums are needed in which successful, what does it say? Medical and what else?
Surgical work.
Surgical work can be done. Now, often we think sanitariums are just lifestyle centers. We stay away from surgery. We stay away from medicine. By the way, chemotherapy can help certain cancers. It's very clear. But what's also very clear is if it's combined with right diet and other things, you only need about 10% of the dose of what the typical American needs. And it's not near as toxic. And of course, they didn't know that. They were giving you the full-blown, plus you were having those other types of things. But going on with this quote, these institutions conducted in accordance with the will of God would remove prejudice and call our work into favorable notice. The highest aim of the workers in these institutions is to be what? The spiritual health of the patients. Successful evangelistic work can be done in connection with medical missionary work. It is as these lines of work are united. That means sanitarium work, which includes New Start, medical, surgical work, and the highest aim, the spiritual health. As all of these lines of work are united, we may expect to gather the most precious fruit for the Lord.
Amen.
So when you went to the Mayo Clinic and said, I'm being asked to go to Africa, what did they say?
I was asked by the GC to go to Africa to help initiate this. And I said, well, I do need to consult, I think, before I give you my answer with my doctor to see if it's a good idea. This is only a short time. My surgery was in 2014, so this is 2016. This is 2 years later, and Mayo Clinic still wants me every 6 months back for checkups. So it's a good idea. And so let's pray about it and use this as a sign whether or not we should go. So I asked my doctor, okay, the CT scan is good, my blood work is good. Do you think it'd be good for me to go to Rwanda, Africa? She said, yeah, sure. When you get back, show me the pictures. I want to see. I said, oh, no. I mean, to do a job there. We wouldn't be coming back permanently for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. We don't know how long God leads us there. Oh, well then you asked that question based on your medical health, wanting my doctor opinion. I said, that's right. Well, go. and that to me was absolutely the word from God, because it wasn't just, well, go if you want to, go, but it was in a crescendoing, enthusiastic, go, and I love that, yeah.
Well, God has led you to Rwanda, and great things have happened there. But it would take another series of stories to tell you, to tell this group how God is now leading you to Weimars. And late this afternoon, we extended a job offer to Verlyn and his wife for Vice President of Academic Affairs here at Weimars. And although there are some details to work out with the General Conference and the division, he has accepted that offer. The Lord has produced some providences here. And we look forward to the Lord continuing to lead you in great ways. He has spared your life for a purpose.
I believe it.
And that purpose is to further his mission here on
Thank you
earth.
very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And thank you very much for being willing to be called of the Lord. He took a tremendous cut in pay going to Africa as a mission, but he said, how can I do otherwise? When the Lord has spared my life, I'm willing to give everything to him. You know, one other thing I didn't ask you, do you still have the mic? One other thing to come up. I think it might be good. Now that this looks like it's all been cured, you've gone back to your old ways of eating, correct?
No. No, I have not. Eating is going to be the same for me the rest of my life. I have chosen to eliminate all refined sugars as much as possible. Sugar is everywhere, so you have to be very selective. Sometimes you can't eliminate everything, but in our house, we do a very good job of eliminating it. But life is still wonderful. You can have a great life without sugar. We enjoy chocolate ice cream that tastes like the real stuff. And I was just telling someone about the recipe. I did it at Andrews University just to prove my point. We have a vice president of finance there that is very, very skeptical about health stuff. And no, I want the real stuff. I mean, all these imitation, they're worse than the real thing. So give me the real thing. I want the worst sweets and the heaviest chocolates. The more sugar, the better. So I took this chocolate ice cream one day and was passing it out, and I went by him and, yeah, well, give me one too. It's not the real stuff, is it? I said, well, you choose. It's got to be the real stuff. Well, he took a bite and he said, what is the real stuff? He ate the whole thing. He said, do you have some more? Here's what's in it. Natural dates are the sweetener. Some coconut milk. A little bit of powdered vanilla for flavor. The unsweetened cocoa powder, a little bit of that. And where's the smooth creaminess coming from? Avocados. Avocados. And when you taste that, you would never believe there was avocado in it. It's wonderful. She's learned to make a cheesecake that is, I like it better than the real stuff. So there are so many neat things that you can discover if you put an attitude to say, let's try to discover something that's fun and that tastes good. And so this change of diet can be fun and not a noose around your neck that you hang yourself on.
I know I've met a lot of, or some patients like you that have been cured as a result of a combined approach. But when they are cured, they go back to their old way of eating. And what happens in those cases is a recurrence. And often at that recurrence, there is no remedy. And so it is, I think you've made a very wise decision to stay with the plan that cured you.
That we have God to trust and help us with an attitude, to help us get through this, because there are tough times. There's no, I'm not going to deny that. It was a tough journey. But once we were in it, my wife and I said many times, if one person comes to Christ because of this, it will have been worth it. Because I saw a girl in her early 30s. She was part of the 14. Beautiful young girl. They said, hey, here comes a guy behind you. He also has the same. Talk to him. He's trying to be upbeat about it. You need to be upbeat also. She refused to even turn around, and she continued walking out the door, discouraged, and she let her emotions. I would imagine she did not have God to turn to. And so that's a key factor. The other thing, as you mentioned, is choice. There have been at least a dozen people that have come to us and said, we have cancer. What did you do? We have shared recipes. We have shared everything. This one girl, also in her upper 30s, she had cancer. And she said, oh, yeah, the diet thing, I did try it. And for the month that I was on it, you know, it's interesting. You are kind of right. My symptoms all disappeared. The pain went away. But to be on that kind of diet, I couldn't do it. And so it went back, and then everything started coming back. I said, look, we'll give you a juicer again. We'll help you again. We went over at midnight and helped them. She said, yeah, that's great. I really appreciate it, but I got to have my other food. She passed away 1.5 years ago, 2.5 years ago. She did not make it. 10 out of the 12 have refused to take a diet approach. I'd rather die than make these difficult diet changes. 10 out of 12. The 2 that said, you have given us some really good stuff, they are still alive. Thank you.
We praise God for what He's done in your life.
Are your hearts full tonight? Tomorrow morning, 9:15, Sabbath school starts, and here in the main auditorium we'll be looking at addiction recovery from Daniel 5. And then the 11 o'clock hour, the God of all comfort. How does God comfort us in times of sorrow, times of crisis? And then baptism for some of you, but it'll be at the Colfax Church because it's a little cold for Moses Rock. And then a memorial service here for Ben Kruger at 4 o'clock. And many people flying in, so keep them in prayer, those that are still traveling. And those that are already here, we are glad you're here. And we look forward to worshiping God at this time as well. And then on Sunday, a wedding for our beloved Shenwan and Stanley. And so we're looking forward to that. They have family here from Indonesia and from, I don't know if someone came from China or not. But also today at the rehearsal meal, Stanley unveiled his brand new green card. So he got not only is he getting married, but he can now go, like he said there at the meal, he said, I've not been able to go home for 10 years. Now I can go back and visit Indonesia. But of course, we all want to have that golden card that allows us to go back home to heaven eventually. Amen. Let's pray together as we close tonight. Father in heaven, Lord, thank you. Our hearts are full as we've heard the good news that you are in charge and that you have done marvelous works. You're the God of hope. So we worship you tonight. We rejoice in you. We lean on you, and we thank you. We come in Christ's name. Amen. Have a good night.